Intentional Moms. This is Val Harrison, the Practically Speaking Mom. I'm so thankful that you join me here each week. You know, one of my greatest honors is when you send me questions, and that is what we're featuring this week. You've got questions, and we've got answers from our guest, my friend, Dr. Amy Barfield. We're talking screen time, stress, and sleep. Let's do this. You're listening to the Practically Speaking Mom podcast, the place for an intentional mom to build a strong family. Each week, we encourage and equip moms for this worthy journey of motherhood. I'm Val Harrison, mom to 7 and wife to Rich for 28 years. We have 3 married children, 2 college students, a high schooler, a 6th grader, and 2 adorable grandsons. That all means the Lord definitely gets an earful of prayers every day from this mama regarding Team Harrison. It also means on this podcast, we talk about all ages and stages of motherhood. Mom, can I walk your journey with you a little each week? I'm going to share practical solutions, encouragement, and sometimes I'm going to tell you the hard things to motivate you to change, but it's all because I love you and I want victory for your family. Let's get started with More Intentional right now. If you've listened to our podcast before, then you know that we really take sound quality very seriously. But on weeks where I record with someone across the miles, I have to ask for a little extra grace, which is the case in this conversation, and also because I'm getting over a cold, so I'm sorry. Now, today in episode 76, we've got 3 topics: screen time, stress, and sleep issues. Then next week in episode 77, we have dedicated the entire program to your questions about ADHD. Psychologist Dr. Amy Barfield has professional experience with lots of ages and issues, and she also has experience at home as a mom. Not only that, but she is also a member of our Intentional Mom Strong Family community. A few weeks ago, I placed 4 theme posts in our group and said, hey moms, share your questions with us so that Dr. Barfield can answer them. Well, I get to ask these questions to Dr. Barfield this week and next week. She's going to share her wisdom with us. So let's jump into our conversation. This is Dr. Amy Barfield. She is a psychologist in private practice in Texas. You're also a mom of 2 kiddos. So we would love first just to learn a little bit about you. Would you want to tell us about your family?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you tonight. So yes, I am a psychologist. I am originally from Mississippi, got some degrees from the University of Southern Mississippi. Then I went up to Indiana where I got my PhD. From Indiana, I moved to Kansas where I got to meet you. I started an internship at Wichita State University, and then I stayed there for 9 years.
Okay.
During that time, I was blessed to have 2 beautiful children who completely changed my life trajectory and got me moving to Texas to be closer to family. And that's where we are today.
So what ages are your kids?
My kid is 6 and Andrew is 3. He'll be 4 here in a couple of months.
Okay. And you also spent a lot of years on working with ADHD patients, correct?
Yes, ma'am. So when I was starting my schooling, I thought I wanted to work with kids exclusively. So I got my master's, and during my training, I spent a lot of time working with adolescents, both in residential and outpatient settings. And then when I went for my PhD, I continued that work through an ADHD clinic. But over time, I learned that adolescent was not my forte for therapy, but I was doing the assessment part and working with families around issues of ADHD. And that's been something I've continued to this day. Just the age range has changed from the younger kiddos to, for the past, 10 years, I've done mostly teenage to adults with ADHD.
Okay. We have several topics that we're going to go over together, and we're going to start with screen time, which is an issue that probably parents are dealing with so much more in the last year with being stuck at home more, and they just can't get out and do the activities that they're used to doing. So everybody's on their screens more. And I know this is a topic that you deal with a lot in your practice as well. What kind of problems do you feel like you're seeing these days with screen time issues with kids?
Overall, it's kind of become an addiction, actually. And the research behind it has changed with the pandemic. It's been really interesting to watch because for years and years, especially the American Pediatric Association had some pretty concrete guidelines on age ranges and how much screen time you should have. And then the pandemic changed all that. It got to the point where you had to have more screen time because that's how kids were going to school. It was about the only way people were socializing. And so it's been kind of interesting to watch over the past year because some of those guidelines and recommendations have actually changed, but in very specific ways that actually help with learning and help with socialization instead of just mass free time on a tablet, playing games, watching videos, and just having free reign that's not really controlled.
I have one listener question about screen time, so I'm going to read that to you and we can talk about it. And then I would love just some tips for us in general on what to do to keep our kids in a good place regarding screen time. So this one is from Brianna, and she said, I'd love suggestions on how to teach kids self-regulation regarding screen time, finding the balance. And she said she's having trouble finding the balance between being screen time picky and letting them play nonstop. So anyway, what would you have to say for her?
Yeah, that one could be a little tricky because every kid is going to be different in how they can tolerate screen time. Anytime you're watching a video or playing an online game, it interacts with the brain in a very, very different way than playing a game with a friend like a board game. And especially with some younger kiddos or kids with attention issues, the sensory pleasure areas of the brain just light up and it's really, really engaging. And when you don't have that, it can kind of feel like a loss. And so your brain can crave that. And so it's kind of knowing each kid and how much they tolerate. And a good kind of ruler for that would be when you take it away, how long does it take them to kind of calm back down? Because I'm guessing a lot of kids, when you take away their screen time or tablet time, they have a little bit of a meltdown. They don't want it to be taken away. On average, you should see them, kind of get back to normal behaviors fairly quickly and just kind of adjust, maybe whine a little bit, but then they forget about it. But if they're having like big major meltdowns, if they're throwing tantrums about it, shorter screen time might be a little bit more helpful. So every kid's going to be a little bit different for that.
Yeah, I would imagine too that since they're having to be on screen so much more for school, it really becomes more important for us as parents to take a step back with their entertainment coming from screens and instead getting more creative with other ways for them to fill their free time.
Absolutely. And with schoolwork being online, that's a little bit more kind of critical thinking, hopefully, maybe. But it's a challenge for teachers too. And a lot of protective factors can be, one-on-one help with screen time. So if they're doing school or even doing some kind of educational app on a tablet, sitting there with them and talking about it. What are they learning? A lot of times I know it's been a blessing at times just to have my kid do a little assignment and go clean the kitchen for a few minutes or go to the bathroom without someone knocking on the door.
Yeah.
But that one-on-one time with tablets or any kind of learning really kind of seems to be a helpful tool.
Yeah. So anything specifically to the issue of self-regulation, some tips for us on helping our kids learn to do that?
So I would recommend starting off with kind of a clear conversation about how much time they're going to have and what the expectation would be for behavior afterwards and giving them frequent reminders as they're on the tablet. Like, so if you say 30 minutes, 15 minutes in, go by and just remind them like, hey, 15 minutes has passed. You have another 15 coming up. And then, again at 10 and 5 and just kind of give them those frequent verbal promptings and then telling them, okay, hey, I've been prompting you for a couple of days. It's your turn to kind of keep track of where you are. And so you let me know when you think you're about halfway through and I'll let you know how close you are. Setting an alarm. A lot of programs now will let you set the time spent on a program and you can set the alarm and have them set the alarm so that they take ownership of how much time they're on there. But giving them just lots of verbal reminders and making sure they actually see you and say, yes, I heard you, or yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and just kind of slowly pull that support away as they take more responsibility for that time limit.
I love that. I love that you mentioned telling them your expectations of how they're going to behave both after they're off the screen and while they're on it. that we expect verbal communication to still happen and those kind of things when we need to talk to them. Letting them know our expectations ahead of time is great for reducing the gray area, I guess, afterwards. Sometimes when we don't set up expectation, then afterwards we're feeling frustrated with their behavior, but we didn't really communicate what we expect behavior to be. Don't you just love Amy's examples of being clear with our kids about our expectations during screen time and after screen time? Being clear about our expectations for our kids in how they're communicating, their behavior, their attitude. These things matter in all different areas of their life. Today, we're talking about it related to screen time. Being clear with our expectations about how our kids handle screen time, how they communicate with us while they're doing screen time, what their behavior is like afterwards, what their attitude is like afterwards. I just love that she brought this up because it's basically putting the reins in their hands about the privilege of screen time. If they want that privilege, then these are the expectations that they have to be meeting. I love it. I will say I have a resource that also can help with this. And it is a resource that helps you have clear expectations with your child about what they have to get done before they can have screen time. It's a list of 9 things your child can do each day before they're free to be on a screen. And honestly, what it was, I made it for my youngest daughter when the pandemic started and, everything was out of sorts and all of her activities had been canceled and she was wanting to be on the screen more. Well, I made her a list of 9 things that she needed to do every day before she was free to get on a screen. So I put the reins in her hands. Now, this is a simple checklist. It's based on a principle. You could make your own checklist, but it's based on this principle. Grow time before screen time. I want my kids to develop the habit of before I play, before I veg, I'm going to grow. So guess what? This grow time before screen time checklist is sitting in your email right now if you are on my Monday email list. You'll also find a link to my internet agreement that we sign at our house in that email as well. Now, this is a way to develop online accountability with our kids. They sign an agreement, and that agreement tells them, here's the steps that I expect you to take if you come across something questionable. Now, it also gives them other scenarios and how to handle those scenarios. And they sign that agreement and I sign it. And we now have a document that helps us to know what questions to ask to keep them accountable. I want to teach them good habits for life with their screen. And so my internet agreement helps with that. It's already in your email. The link to it is, it's actually a $2 download. You can also get it on my website, which is practicallyspeakingmom.com. But let's jump back into the conversation now with Dr. Amy Barfield, and we're going to talk about stress. Let's move on to stress in general right now. Stress is higher for everybody. Moms are trying to juggle these new and constantly changing systems, and our kids are just as stressed dealing with all of these constant flexibility required. I think we're just all getting weary of it. And with stress being very high, our routines being constantly changing over the past year, what advice do you have for moms during times where we have to provide a lot of flexibility and stress management for ourselves and for our kids? I guess isolation would be another aspect that's probably causing stress for everybody in general. But do you have any suggestions for us about stress management?
Be gentle with ourselves. It is a hard time. And no other time in history have we really had this level of isolation and uncertainty with the health situation that's gone on this long, especially when we're so used to being connected. And now you're being told, nope, stay at home. And when you do go out, keep a mask on, don't touch people, don't give hugs. And it can be really isolating. And especially for moms, when you are not used to having your kids around 24/7, it can absolutely feel like a lot. So the first piece of advice is be gentle with yourself and know that self-care can take many, many different shapes and forms. I know that a lot of the people I've been working with, finding ways of meeting those kind of self-care avenues has changed, because a lot of people are like, well, I can't go out with my friends, or I can't go shopping, or I can't go get my nails done anymore. And so finding some creative ways at home to kind of meet those needs, doing a yoga class with a friend, but doing it in on your own living room and zooming in, or just taking a few moments to read a book, have your favorite smell going in the house, listening to music. Mindfulness and meditation is something that I've been working with a lot in my practice, and trying to teach people how to calm their brain down and deal with that stress through mindfulness. There are lots of apps out there, like Calm, Headspace are some pretty popular ones, or you can even just Google mindfulness online and have so many resources that are popping up now. And just taking 10, 15 minutes to do a deep breathing exercise or a guided imagery exercise, just to kind of give yourself that little space just to breathe, can be so powerful and relaxing to help you deal with that next moment at home.
Yeah, that's good. And as you're listing all of those things, I'm thinking, as we're trying to raise adults who can also self-regulate their stress, we should be verbalizing to them, hey, I'm going to take some self-care time to read a book. What are you going to do to refresh yourself for a few minutes right now too? So I like that. Well, I would like to address another listener question. And this one is a little more general than, we've been talking about pandemic stress, but just in general, she said her kids, they get stressed pretty easily. For my girls, it is when something is difficult or when they get upset with each other. For me, it is when I feel overwhelmed about having so much to do. And also in recent years, I've developed a driving anxiety that I never used to have. I would love some tips on how to overcome anxieties in general. So what would you say to that, Mom?
My heart goes out to you first, because it sounds like there's a lot going on. When you're kind of stressed out as a mom, it feels like everything else is bigger. So, practicing to learn self-calming ways that you can do and then teach everybody else in the family, like deep breathing. Mindfulness apps out there, just to kind of take a little moment. And if you're going up for a hard task with your kids, before you even start on the homework, let's do a group exercise just to kind of calm down and relax for a moment, and kind of carve out that time and teach self-care. Whether it be go crawl in your bed with your favorite book for a few minutes, or run around outside and just breathe the fresh air. But just take those little things that are comforting to your kids and encouraging those, and taking little breaks and open communication.
That's good. It seems like with my kids, when I'm noticing a pattern of stress, if I address it directly and start asking questions of you probably know better questions to ask. Here's some that I ask, but you can fine tune my approach. What things seem to cause this? This is what I'm kind of noticing in you that starts raising anxiety or fears or concerns or stress. Do you see it that way? Or am I identifying the wrong thing in the situations? Is it really something else? So I kind of start there and then try to help them. I'm just trying to make them more aware of themselves, so that they can then, sometimes if we just understand what's going on, we handle it better and it's less stressful to us. But what would be the next step in that conversation? We've had a conversation and we've kind of identified these are the things that tend to make us anxious or stressed. What would be the next step from there?
Yeah, absolutely. Asking them specific questions about, this is what I'm noticing, and kind of focusing on those behavioral aspects that you see. Saying like, this is what I noticed. I noticed X, Y, and Z. When we start doing homework, you seem to kind of get really red in the face. You tense up, and I hear a lot of huffing. What's going on in your head? And asking those kind of feeling type questions, and see if you can get them to open up. And then if there's a specific cause that can be fixed, like, well, I don't understand how to do this. Okay, well, let's figure out what that answer is together. Or if it's just an overall sense of feeling overwhelmed, then, okay, well, let's just go calm down for a few minutes. Or it might just be a change of scenery. It could be just practical, like, this chair is really uncomfortable and I hate sitting here when we do homework. Okay. But just having that conversation about what's kind of driving some of that. And sometimes, especially if there's multiple things going on in life, it could help just to talk to someone else outside the family. So having a trusted family friend or going and seeing a counselor can be a different outlet in developing specific tools for changing the way you think.
I love that. That makes me think of, when you mentioned a friend or having the conversation of what does reduce stress for you. So that if we identify the things that are causing stress and the things that reduce stress, then maybe we can get a game plan. Because some of those things that cause stress, we can't get away from. If math is stressful, math still has to happen every day. So maybe identifying what within math is stressful, or like you said, identifying different, could we do a different room? Can we turn on some music, or what kind of music helps, or does silence help? Do I need headphones? That kind of thing. So let's shift gears to sleep. And I have to say that I regularly get questions on sleep issues with kids. And I know for me, raising my 7 kids, it was one of the top issues that, it affects them, but it really affected me as a mom. If my kids were getting good sleep or not, I needed good sleep, or I just was not a great mom. I wasn't nearly as good. So lots of sleep issues constantly that are brought up in my ministry. But I'll go through a couple of specific questions, and then maybe you can kind of just help us in general with it. One has a 6-year-old, 9-year-old, and 4-year-old, and all of them occasionally have nightmares. And another listener also brought up the issue of nightmares. So, do you have any advice for us? Like, one of them wanted to know, how do I get my child back to sleep and calmed down after a nightmare? And the other one really just wanted to know, what is going on? What might be some reasons for these nightmares? And is there anything we can do to reduce them, or how do we deal with them?
That's a big one. To a certain extent, nightmares and bad dreams through childhood is fairly normal. If you're having them frequently, it might be something you want to talk to the pediatrician about, because sometimes there's sleep disorders that are going on, even in childhood, that can be diagnosed and kind of worked through medically. But if it's not a medical issue, the first thing I would take a look at is that daytime routine. Like, how much time is being spent in front of the TV watching, kind of violent cartoons or things that might be kind of content scary. My daughter, when she was 4.5, I think, was watching PJ Masks. We don't watch TV at home, but she was getting it at daycare. And she started having nightmares about PJ Masks because the bad guys came out at night. And so just knowing where that content came from and where that fear came from, and asking them just not to continue watching that was her fix. And they went away fairly soon. But taking a look at what's going on during the day that might be contributing to them, checking out the bedtime routine, making sure that you have a solid, reliable, and kind of predictable routine with the same time of bed, same activities prior to bed. So maybe you read a book, brush your teeth, put on pajamas, whatever that routine is, but having some just kind of wind down time, about 30 to 45 minutes before bed, can kind of prep, especially little ones, to have their brain understand that, hey, we're getting ready to relax and go to sleep. I find that doing a kind of thankful for the day routine can help going and having a positive mindset going into sleep. And then talking about nightmares in general. And so having a plan for, okay, so how can you calm down when you wake up at night? What are some things that make you feel safe? Because you are safe. And so having that conversation about, like, maybe, you can get out your favorite book and just read it for a few minutes to help you kind of calm down. Maybe you have a special little snuggie that goes to bed with you. And rewarding good behavior. And so, like, if they get scared and wake up, talking about, okay, let's go back to bed, and rewarding that brave behavior of trying to go back to sleep when it's hard.
So what would be some rewards in situations like that?
It could be anything. Stickers work for my kids. So if my daughter has gone through a little period where she'll have some bad dreams, and she'll come wake us up and we talk to her about it, and she's now able to kind of go back to sleep. And if she only needs one trip back to bed, then she gets a sticker the next morning. We've actually gotten to where we're starting like, hey, if you wake up and you can kind of do X, Y, and Z to help yourself, which right now it's you can turn on your light and read your book because she has a little nightlight beside her bed, or you can, say your favorite Bible verse, you can sing a song, all those little things that she does to self-calm. If she doesn't get back up out of bed, she gets a sticker in the morning. It could be a special activity with mom or dad the next day, or building up for a bigger event if you have more time. I usually don't do food rewards, but some people do use food rewards, which is fine. But more quality time or like little trinket, like a sticker. Kids will work anything for stickers.
Okay, that's awesome. So another person was saying that their 12-year-old son has been having trouble sleeping without melatonin. It takes him 2+ hours to fall asleep. He wakes up several times during the night. Sometimes he remembers them, sometimes he doesn't. And here's her question. Is it normal to wake up so much during the night?
Different kids at different stages of their life will wake up fairly frequently, but they should be able to fall asleep again pretty quickly. A 12-year-old, I'm not quite sure on the age range of that particular one, but I do know that if it's taking them more than 20 minutes to fall back asleep, that could be indicative of a sleep disorder. It would be something to talk to a medical doctor about.
Okay, well, here's another one. She says, I would love advice on how to keep a 2.5-year-old from getting out of bed, coming into our room 100 times before falling asleep. Once she's asleep, she's typically fine and stays in bed, but it's that falling asleep process. So any advice for her?
Oh, we went through this with both of my kids.
Yeah.
It can be draining.
It is.
So going back and kind of talking about the expectations, and you might need to start scaffolding some of those behaviors and rewarding good behaviors. So if they're getting up 100 times a night, saying, okay, we're not doing this. And if it's a comfort thing and they just don't like to be alone, maybe starting off with reading book in bed, sitting in the room and just saying, okay, I'm going to come back and check on you in 5 minutes. And you have to go back and check in 5 minutes, which feels like an eternity for a 2-year-old. Mm-hmm. And then you say, okay, I'm going to come back in another 5 minutes. And you might do 5-minute increments for the first couple of nights, for almost an hour if it needs to. And then you say, okay, hey, you've been doing really, really, really good. I'm so proud of how brave you've been to stay in your room. I'm going to come check on you in 10 minutes. I promise I'll come back, but you just stay in here and we'll be back. And then you kind of lengthen out that time in between check-ins and rewarding those good behaviors if they can make it those increments.
We're going to stop there for today. Before we go, I've got to make sure you know how to get the resources that are available for you today. Now let's just listen to this list of things that is in this week's blog post. Number 1, Dr. Barfield had more information for us about sleep than what we were able to fit in today's podcast, so she was gracious enough to type up some help for us regarding sleep. And that is the main portion of this week's blog post. Secondly, the grow time before screen time checklist. Thirdly, there is a link to the family internet agreement. And then, of course, all the regular show notes. So all of that is already sitting in your email if you're on my Monday email list. If you are not, you can be. It's super simple. Just go to my website, practicallyspeakingmom.com, scroll to the bottom of the page, enter your email, and that's it. You're done. But in the meantime, if you want access to all of these things, just go to my website, click on blog, and it will be there, part 1 with Dr. Amy Barfield. We will pick back up with Dr. Barfield next week as we focus on questions related to ADHD. Looking forward to being with you right here next week.